Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and everyone out there, I hope you're having a fantastic day because we have a great show lined up for you with, in the first part of the show, however much time that we can get out of it. We have BioKey. They are, they've been on the show a number of times. Always love to have them on. And if you've ever been interested in biometric security, cybersecurity is a very, very popular topic here on the show that we talk with experts, but this is kind of taking it from a different angle from a company that actually provides the solutions that, kind of enterprise level and, I'm sure many of you out there have used at one time or another. So we're going to be talking to the chairman of the company to, really get a good handle on the state of the technology, where it's at, where it's going, that kind of thing. Like I said, I always love having these kinds of guests on. But before we get started, computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything, including the show notes. You'll also find articles, reviews, things like that. Most recent article, I believe, is the 5 scariest things in tech, just in time for Halloween. And we also have a review up of rechargeable batteries, but not just any kind of rechargeable batteries. Rather, these are batteries that you can recharge with USB-C. So it's a different kind of battery, and we know the stigma around rechargeable batteries. These actually turned out very, very good. So again, computeramerica.com, check it out. Everything that we do here, including links to our guests today. If you want to check out BioKey, bio-key.com, or just head on over to our website and we'll have a link to it after the program. So everyone, I think that's just about it. Obviously, Halloween just around the corner. Unfortunately, being a radio show, we don't have any kind of costume contest going on or anything like that. Maybe next year we'll do something fun like that. But I hope all of you out there are safe. And remember, I don't think there's been a single instance of a random kid getting a razor blade in his candy. So still be safe, check the candy, but don't freak out about it. There's things that you really need to concern yourself with in terms of safety and protecting everyone. And that's the best segue I can go from dangerous candy to our guest today. So as I said before, BioKey, they've been an industry leader for a number of years, and we have the pleasure of talking with the one, the only, Mr. Mike DePasquale. He is the chairman and CEO of the company, and let's go ahead and bring him on here in just a second. As soon as I hit the button, there we go. Mike, how you doing? Welcome on to Computer America.
I am doing great, Ben. It is wonderful to be back on the show again to speak with you and your audience.
Yeah. Again, I think our first run-in was out at CES 2016, where I was able to go out there and you gave me this nifty USB drive that I think had like a fingerprint reader on it. Obviously, I think you guys have been in business, and I'm sure you can give us a little bit of a background, but for a number of years. Why don't we go ahead and start off with the background for those of the audience who don't know about you. When did BioKey start? What's your background? Have you always been in cybersecurity? Please.
Great. Well, a little background on BioKey first. BioKey has been in business for 25 years. Believe it or not, we were founded in 1994 and have been developing our biometric technology, both software and hardware, over the last 25 years to get to the point where we are today. And the whole premise and I'll call it design around the company was to utilize biometric technology to replace passwords, pins, tokens, cards, keys, all the things that we traditionally use to access not only our digital world, but also our physical world. So we've been at this for a very, very long time. We've been selling and marketing this technology to, as you described before, enterprises, that's businesses and business customers, governments around the world, and also to consumers. When we met out at CES, I provided you one of our, I believe it was our either Eco ID or Side Touch or Side Swipe finger scanner that plugs into a USB port on any computer, tablet, or laptop or desktop, and allows you, without any special software or any special downloads, to replace your PIN to access your Windows 10 device. So if you're using a laptop or a tablet with Windows 8 or 10 operating system, and you have the PIN enabled to allow secure access to that device, you can replace that with our biometric automatically by just plugging it into the USB. As long as you're up to date on your Windows Update software, all the drivers will come down and all the magic stuff will happen, and you'll be able to utilize a biometric. You'll also be able to utilize a biometric to access a number of websites and portals that are now supporting biometric access. And we also provide for the consumer, when they buy our finger scanners, whether they buy it on Amazon or through Dell or through the Microsoft Store, we have a little piece of software that we provide. I'll call it almost a password vault that allows you to utilize your biometric in place of the password that you're using to access all of your different accounts. It could be your bank account, your healthcare management account, it could be your social media accounts. So we're out and about to fundamentally make it not only more secure to access information and to store information on your computer, but to make it dramatically more convenient for you to be able to do so.
Yeah.
So that's what we do.
And I wanted to jump in here because part of and I have so many questions, but I'm going to start with this one with the biometrics, and obviously I think with with BioKey you are focusing, and we're going to get into why you focus on fingerprint scanning, and our other forms of biometric information, maybe like face scans and things like that. Are they more, or are they something that you're looking into? But my first question has to do with this is only kind of like one part of it. Don't you also need, I'm not saying everyone needs a password manager, but like the fingerprint scanner works amazing, but it only works amazing if you kind of use it in conjunction with a 16, 24 character password that's full of uppercase, lowercase, special characters, numbers, that kind of thing. Like it allows you to swipe a finger, get into your accounts, but it's a mix with very, very secure passwords that no reasonable person would ever recall off the top of their head.
Well, that's what we call multi-factor authentication, right? And multi-factor authentication is now being widely deployed and widely used by both enterprises as well as consumers. Microsoft is pushing it, Google is pushing it with Google Authenticator. Mm-hmm. So we want you to have something that you know and something that you have. So something that you know is a password, a PIN, maybe a token or a card. Something you have is your biometric, right? That's unique to you. And what's interesting in that question that you just asked is about 2 weeks ago, the FBI put out a private industry notice, mm-hmm. basically stating that for enterprises in particular, but also for consumers, to have a really secure multi-factor authentication solution, they should include a biometric. That's an incredible pronouncement by the number one cybersecurity investigatory agency in the United States. So what we're finding is even traditional multi-factor authentication that includes a really long, sophisticated password, or even includes some sort of a token, maybe an SMS message that you get to your phone to confirm an account access, is circumventable by the hackers, by what we call man-in-the-middle attacks. And so what the FBI wants to see, it wants to see more companies and consumers utilizing a biometric as part of their multi-factor authentication option for access to information.
Yeah, and by the way, since you were last on, and this was much bigger news a year or two ago, but it had to do with wow, the GDP. I keep on saying the GDPR, but it's oh my God, the thing that was passed in the Eurozone that improved privacy and making sure that if there are any data breaches, people are alerted, that kind of thing. I'm sure that you know it off top of your head.
You were actually correct. It is GDPR. So you were right in the acronym name. You were correct.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure that since that was last introduced, since we talked, services such as yours and really the work that you do, before it was kind of like, companies should protect their customers, companies should protect their employees and their data. And, and if you have a data leak, well, we tried our best and that's whatever. Now with those rules implemented, there's actual repercussions, or at least there should be, for companies that don't follow those guidelines. Have you found, I don't want a full, kind of business model, kind of business increase you have there, but have you seen any kind of increase in just general, safety and security among companies after those rules were implemented?
Well, for sure, and this has been going on for quite some time. When you look at the traditional data breach that we've read about almost daily for the last probably 5 years, almost 5 years now, those data breaches have an incredible expense associated with them. Because any sizable company, for the most part, if you're on the Fortune 1000 list here in the U.S. or in the Global 5000, you're fundamentally dealing with the consumer at some level. And so if you're housing any consumer data, you are subject to and could be a target for global hackers. And so if that consumer information is compromised, not only do you have a PR issue on your hands, but you also have a very costly issue to deal with in the context of protecting those consumers who were exposed. So generally what you'll see is companies sign up with one of the 3 large credit bureaus, and they give them a subscription to their credit file manager or their management tool. So these are all things that cost companies not only from a reputational perspective, but also from a hard cost perspective. So in the regulated industries, there is absolutely no doubt that we're seeing a significant uptake in business. And the highly regulated industries are healthcare, finance, government, any government contractor, for example, that may have sensitive information is required to meet the NIST standards for multi-factor authentication. And so that's a big driver for our business.
Yeah.
But consumers are also now being guided in the direction of strong multi-factor authentication. And so our biometric options are just not only the perfect option for security, but they provide a level of convenience for the consumer and the user that unfortunately more traditional technologies don't provide. I mean, a 16-digit password, as you described before, that you change every 30 days, that you don't write down on a little stick-em note, and you keep private to yourself, is very secure. Except, unfortunately, you probably use the same password in 20 accounts because we can't make up those dynamic combinations, right?
Yeah.
And timing for each one is just incredibly difficult. Some passwords expire in 30 days, some in 90 days, some in 120, some go 2 years before they ask you to change it, and then you panic because you can't remember the existing password. So it's a situation where biometrics in general, and you brought up before, biometrics are more than just finger biometrics. There's face, there's iris, there's different behavioral type biometric technologies that are available. But finger is the dominant one. It's right now today the most accurate and least invasive one. Sometimes people struggle having to stare into a camera, like Face ID, for example, is part of the Apple authentication options. Touch ID was the fingerprint version. So think about being on the subway in New York City or in a movie theater or at dinner and having to, kind of hold the phone up to your face, or driving in your car. So, touching the finger scanner is less invasive. It's, I would say, more convenient for the most part. But there are really good biometric options out there today that are going to drive the replacement of passwords and traditional authentication options through business and consumers, no doubt.
So yeah, and year over year, every time Apple releases a new phone, it's their Face ID. They always tout that this iteration is the one that finally gets it right. It's better in low light scenarios and that kind of thing. Eventually, I'm sure they'll be right. But I will say that we saw issues especially with. I think it was Samsung's Face, their version of Face ID, and actually coworkers and of course siblings, things like that. They were opening up each other's phones because it just wasn't, maybe the technology just wasn't there, and maybe it had too much leeway just to, for usability's sake, they were identifying, just not enough points on a person's face to, to truly get a good individual ID. But I mean, we see issues with facial recognition, some with voice recognition. Some of the stuff that Intel's doing with the RealSense and their cameras and Windows, even that is kind of dodgy. Fingerprints are pretty good. My question to you is that with all these different ways, and you may be able to speak to how a fingerprint is stored, at least at BioKey. Is it an actual picture of your finger? Does it create, based on certain points on your fingerprint, does it create like a certain kind of passcode that it, is able to? My point is that we have seen a lot of data breaches, and I'm not saying BioKey, but other organizations have lost a lot of information. And let's say the Department of Defense recently lost a good chunk of their employees, and Social Security numbers, names, addresses. Very hard, but that kind of data can be changed, including Social Security number. But a person's fingerprint, a person's iris scan, a person's face, much harder to change, because you're talking about plastic surgery, or in some cases just, not really all that possible. How is biometric data stored? And if it is compromised, is that just a completely different level of problem over losing, say, something like a password?
Well, that is a great question, and it's one that I think leads to and allows me to clear up a lot of misconceptions about biometrics in general, and in particular about BioKey biometrics. So the first part of the solution here is we simply scan the finger. We use the finger scanner almost like a camera to just basically take a picture of the finger. We then basically enhance that image within our software base, and then we algorize it. So we build a mathematical model of that finger, and we'll pull anywhere from 500 to 1,200 data points off that finger and build that mathematical model. We'll encrypt it, and then we'll store it. And when we go to match the fingerprint against the one that's scanned to the one that's stored, we're matching an encrypted template or model against the one that's stored perhaps in the back-end database or on the device. So the misnomer here is that that a man in the middle is going to be able to intercept the image of your fingerprint.
Right.
That's not going to happen. Many of the finger scanners that we're using today and marketing today have liveness detect capability. So we actually can test to ensure that the finger that's scanned is a real live finger, right? Not a gummy finger or one, for example, there were stories a couple of years ago about cutting someone's finger off and using it to
that's something that happens in spy movies where they walk up with like a severed eye and yeah.
Right. So in that regard, think about what we're doing, right? So we're scanning the finger, but then we're basically deleting that image, and we're utilizing all these encryption technologies and keys to ensure the secure transport of that biometric back to the host server where it's matched or to the device in and of itself where it's matched. So we're adding a level of security that, and I never use in security, anyone who's been in cybersecurity as long as I have been will never and should never use the word never, because anything is possible.
Right.
But the likelihood of possibility is certainly dramatically reduced in the context of using biometrics versus traditional authentication means. So that's number one. Number two, you asked a very good question, and one that concerns people all the time. What happens if my fingerprint is compromised? I only have 10 fingers, right? So after I run out of the 10 fingers, my life is over because I can never ever again be identified or authenticated with that with that particular technology. Well, again, when you think about what I just described, you understand that the security measures, the encryption technologies, the transport of the biometric, the way we're doing things in a way that makes it very, very secure. So the risk of that happening is pretty much slim to none. If you think about facial biometrics, and in particular, you think about selfies and photographs. Think about walking in Times Square, New York City, and your face being surveilled a minimum of 100 times in a matter of minutes. Your face is fundamentally public information.
Right.
Your fingerprint, to some degree, is public information in that when you opened the door this morning to go into your office or to go into your car, you left a latent print. You left a potential image of your fingerprint. But the way we utilize the technology, right, makes it secure. So your fingerprint could be out in the public, in the open market. Your face is certainly out there for sure. Your iris, maybe not so much, but it's the way we use the technology that makes it secure and ensures that your privacy is actually protected utilizing the technology versus not using it.
Yeah, it's this whole idea that the way that you kind of described how you take the picture, delete the picture, handle the data. You put those fears to rest in that regard, but there are other companies that may not be as secure as you are with finger scans and things like that. So it's also nice to hear that even if something were compromised somewhere else, and really, that's something that we've mentioned in this interview so far, is that if you use the same password in a dozen different places, and one of those gets compromised, suddenly the other 11 are also in danger. And so if your fingerprint scan is compromised in one place, then everywhere that you use that kind of biometric data is also compromised, except, as you said, they need your living finger to actually, kind of do that thing. So
and not only do you need the living finger, but you need the algorithm to decipher
right.
and de-algorize the template such that it can be matched. So it's a very complex thing to be able to do. It's, again, we never use the word never, and we never say impossible, but it's pretty hard.
Yeah, that's kind of our advice after having countless security professionals here on the show, is that it's that old adage, you don't have to run faster than the bear, just faster than your friend. Just make yourself a little bit more secure than everyone else out there. And unless you are the president of the United States, the prime minister of Europe, whatever, you are probably not worth the effort to, kind of break into if you take the proper steps and just, keep a very security hygienic stance, I guess is something I could say. Just be safe out there. And I also wanted to touch on another idea that, hey, I'm just going to be upfront about it. I'm 28 years old. I'm solidly a millennial. That dreaded group of people that just keeps getting mentioned over and over again. But you have a point here saying that millennials are embracing the use of biometrics, and I wanted to talk about the trend of biometrics. I know that the FBI said that this is something that everyone should be looking into. It's not the only solution, but it is in a layered approach. It's a good step to have. I know that my parents are very skeptical about, scanning your face and scanning your fingers and things like that to get into your devices. They're very wary of technology, either through a lack of understanding. I hope they're not listening. Either through a lack of understanding, or just they're afraid of, kind of being monitored. But as you kind of mentioned, the millennials are really taking to biometric data. Is that something you're seeing too, or?
Well, absolutely, and here's why. It's not that complex. Millennials are utilizing online services like never before, and they've grown up in an online e-commerce world. So consummating transactions multiple times a day that sometimes engage their credit cards or their bank accounts. They utilize social media in a way that, again, is innate and native to them. So the idea of having an abrasive authentication option that changes frequently is very problematic. And so, again, it goes back to what we said before, having to have a 16-digit password, having to change it every 30 to 60 or 90 days. It has to be complex. That is a real challenge for those who take advantage of all the opportunities in the e-commerce and the online venue. So this is why they are embracing the more convenient, more secure options. So it's not that complex. And actually, it's interesting, you mentioned if your parents were listening, you hope they weren't listening because you said they don't understand. But on the other hand, if they were listening, they would have gotten a good perspective, I think, that I tried to provide around the security associated with utilizing, our biometrics and biometrics in general. So it goes both ways. But, there's still a contingent out there that's very concerned about privacy and, very concerned about, being compromised and having, as you described before, losing your digital life because you were compromised or your biometric was compromised. If quality solutions are deployed with all the basic security techniques that I described, this is very secure technology.
I completely agree. And hey, I'll point them to this interview after the fact, because I think you're doing a very good job at breaking down, what it means to actually use this kind of technology, because the actual use case, it could not be simpler. Look into a camera, swipe your finger, that kind of thing. The action's very simple. What happens, I think that's where a lot of our listeners may be fuzzy on the details. So I'm happy that you're on the show and doing that for us. And I wanted to, maybe bring them into the fold. And like you mentioned, the fingerprint scanner that you introduced a couple years ago, and here on your website you have tons and tons and tons of different fingerprint scanners, and here, and by the way, anyone out there watching the video portion, of course, thank you for listening on IRN, but you have everything from, let's see, side pass, side swipe, eco ID, PIV Pro, side touch, and of course those are just fingerprint scanners. You're working on other areas as well. What's with all the different devices? And if, let's just say, general consumers wanted to get started, what device would you point them to?
Well, I would say if they have a desktop device or a desktop computer, which is less likely these days, although people still do have and utilize desktops in a big way, they would use our Eco ID finger scanner. That's the white one that they can see on the website. Sits nice on a tabletop, has a cord that plugs into the USB port on their desktop and can sit right on top next to their keyboard. So that would be the device they would use. If you're using a tablet or a laptop, you would utilize the side pass or the side touch or the side swipe, depending upon your choice. You like to swipe, you like to touch. We have both options, but those are ergonomically designed. They're very, very small in package. They're very high quality. And all of those finger scanners, no matter which one you choose, carry a list price quantity one of $39.99. You can go to Amazon.com, you can go to the Microsoft Store, you can go to Jet.com, Dell.com. You can buy them in virtually a number of different electronic venues. So they're easy to acquire, they are easy to use, and they're very high quality.
So talk about this, and I noticed this by looking at a couple of your products. Obviously, Windows is coming up a lot. Windows 8.1, although I think Windows 10, if memory serves right, just surpassed, I want to say, 100 million devices, and it's only going to continue to grow. The adoption rate for Windows 10, I think, has been not everything Microsoft wanted, but it's doing darn good. And I think Windows 10 has something that you listed here as well, Windows Hello. Talk about your partnership with Microsoft. I'm assuming there is a partnership, and just I don't know, what do you see as the relationship between Microsoft and biometrics, and maybe just moving away from traditional passwords?
Well, Microsoft stated 2 years ago that they were on a mission to eliminate passwords and to move to a multi-factor authentication venue. And so when they introduced Windows Hello and Windows Hello for Business, it was the biometric option right within Windows 10, Windows 8 and Windows 10, that would allow enterprise and consumer users to utilize a biometric in place of a password or a PIN. So that was their initial foray into the market to move customers away from the traditional authentication options. We started working with Microsoft a number of years ago, and we became their go-to vendor for finger scanners. Our finger scanners are sold in the Microsoft stores. They're sold online. They are very big supporters and proponents of biometrics, not just finger biometrics. They have also a facial recognition camera that they sell on their website. And if you look on their website, you'll also find our finger scanners. The cameras, infrared cameras, are still quite expensive in the $100 to $200 range. Our finger scanners are $39.99, so dramatically different price point. And, it's all a matter of choice. But our relationship with Microsoft continues to flourish. In fact, next week, a little bit of a plug, we'll be at the Microsoft Ignite event, which is their largest customer event of the year. There'll be over 25,000 of their largest customers there, reviewing all of the latest Microsoft technology. They have a whole day dedicated to cybersecurity. So we'll be there exhibiting and supporting them, and they'll be supporting us in, again, the quest to replace the password.
Very, very cool. And obviously, Windows Hello is more than just a login screen and, replacing the PIN. There's a number of different services here, Cloud Drive, OneDrive, Share File, there we go, and a number of these other programs that you kind of work with. Two things. If people want to, kind of broaden the capabilities of their fingerprint scanner, what other services do you kind of work with? And then to bring on other services, is this something that, let's say, enter a random service here because currently no one's paying me, but one of these other random services, do they have to approach you and say, hey, we'd like to work with BioKey, or is it, completely on your end, and if the customers want it, you'll make it work on your end?
That's a great question and a lead into the next solution, which will not require buy-in on either party's part. We have a product called ID Director for SAML, and SAML is a standard for security that's being widely adopted in the online world. So most e-commerce sites are adopting SAML. SAML is already biometrically enabled, and so it will allow users to be able to connect up through to SAML-enabled sites. Remember I mentioned a little bit earlier about the package we provide with the finger scanner when the consumer buys it that allows them to replace it's a password vault that allows them to replace their password with the biometric for their own personal sites. So that little password vault, the standards that are emerging and more sites that are adopting SAML and adopting biometric enablement are going to make this widely available for consumers and for enterprise users to utilize biometrics in place of the password. So it's only going to continue to grow. Right now, again, the real prominent sites are accepting it, but it's just a matter of time before it blossoms out to the entire population of major applications that are available.
Long-term listeners of the show know that I tend to geek out whenever, like I had USB 3, the organization behind the USB 3.1 standard, and ICANN and all these other kind of industry standard policy making entities, and I love standardization. It just means that things just work and you don't have to really fuss with it. Be it HDMI 2.1, be it, USB or things like that. I love it when things just kind of happen and you don't have to really worry about it. So I'm happy that you turned me on to SAML. So that's another one to add to my brain. Very, very cool. And of course, that's just going to work with your products. And by the way, we saw a lot of these other ones, a couple of these other fingerprint scanners. Do you see that as, kind of just the best solution for you because they work so well currently? Or do you see in a couple of years, because there are cameras everywhere and that cameras are just getting cheaper and cheaper to produce and put either inside monitors or in certain places? And actually, way back in the interview, you mentioned this just briefly, and I think I know what you're talking about because of other security professionals. But this idea that you can actually identify someone, that if Ben gets to work every day at 9 a.m., right, and he sits down, moves his mouse in a certain way, logs into this program in a certain way, or, just kind of, you can build up a profile of custom, I guess, tendencies or characteristics. And I think that I've heard other security professionals say that that's a way that you can, that's its own biometric data, is how Ben, moves the mouse, how he types, how he does this, when mixed with location data and time of day and things like that. I mean, is something like that kind of the future of kind of what you're trying to do here, where it's not even a fingerprint scan at that point, it's just the system knows that it's Ben because Ben is acting like Ben?
Absolutely. And one day we may actually be there to the point where that behavioral biometric data and information may be good enough for a highly confident authentication. But right now, we use that in combination with other modes of authentication to ensure that the person is really who they say they are. So multi-factor means using multiple factors and multiple means and ways to confidently identify and authenticate an individual. We're looking at a whole set of new and innovative technologies that will evolve over time. And so we will continue to stay very, very current. I say we want to be on the leading edge, not necessarily the bleeding edge,
right.
Because for those of us who have been in this business for more than 15 years, we know that it was like pushing this huge ball uphill to get the technology to the point where it's being adopted today. And so we want to stay on the leading edge, not the bleeding edge, and we want to make sure, because this came up also in the interview, we want to be sure that whatever technology we introduce to the market, that not only is it going to be accepted, but it's going to work for the majority of the population. And we're gonna want to make sure that it has all of the security and all of the encryption and all of the protections that I described built into it right up front. That's really important, because the biometric industry in general 10 plus years ago got a really bad rap because inferior technologies were entering the market, and they weren't really ready for prime time. Some of the stuff that you described, in relation to facial recognition technology and so forth, things evolve and they get better. But when you put inferior technology in the market, you fundamentally damage the industry. And we will always stay current, but we'll always be looking at technologies that we think could be widely deployed.
And stupid question, but and I'm full of them. But stupid question, sci-fi of the 90s and the early 2000s had people, especially in very, very secure facilities, like whenever they have some fictitious military installation, they would have people put their entire hand and palm and 5 fingers on a pad like that. Do you think something like that is, kind of still working its way, or do you think just a fingerprint is enough to make one of those unique IDs?
Oh, we're well past hand geometry. Hand geometry, which is what you saw in the sci-fi movies, 5, 8, 10 years ago, is gone. A single scan of a finger is dramatically more accurate than that. We'll still see some palm scans. And there's some new and innovative technology that is interesting that we're looking at in that regard, because it can also be highly accurate. Certainly iris scans. And by the way, if you're getting on a nuclear submarine or you are, entering a very highly secure government facility, you should be doing finger, face, iris, and you should enter a 20-digit password. So again, that's multi-factor. And it's risk-based. So you use more factors for the greater risk. And if that risk is really, really high, again, maybe you use 4 factors of authentication. But for the typical, I'll call it consumer use case, where we're talking about accessing bank information, healthcare information, social media accounts, probably 2 modes of authentication is likely enough, especially if it's good technology. And it's kept, and it even includes a password that's kept somewhat updated and private.
And I say this to every security company and professional that comes on the show. You guys have your work cut out for you, because we cover the news very often here on Computer America, and the stories and the hackings and even just the data breaches that happen, they aren't because people aren't using solutions like BioKey, but it's happening because they're doing things like leaving passwords, usernames, and customer data on servers that are not secure, not encrypted. Like, they aren't even following the basics, and getting them to adopt things like this. Like, I think if they just at a bare minimum, use BioKey or, just encrypted their data, they'd be much safer. And, it's really not that difficult. So you guys have your work cut out for you, because it's about awareness, and it's about just making sure that you just do the basics. Like, this is not magic to stay secure. And so that's a little PSA, but I wanted to ask you this next question. And it has to do with something that, out at CES, we're seeing year over year, a growing industry. Internet of Things, the buzzword, IoT, this idea that everything that you own is connected to the internet in some way. like you mentioned, these fingerprint scanners, readers, so on and so forth, they work with laptops, desktop computers, that kind of thing. And maybe even tablets if they're compatible. They work great, but you're not going to have a fingerprint reader for your light bulb that may be connected to a secure Wi-Fi network that you also want to protect. But again, you're just not going to have a fingerprint reader on every Internet of Things device. So how do you see BioKey interacting with the Internet of Things? Is it about just protecting the major, risk points, like, again, computers, or is there something you can do about all of these different access points?
Well, that's a great question. For sure, most individuals are accessing their Internet of Things devices, like their home security system, their webcams, their heating and air conditioning systems, through a device. And they're doing it through a tablet, a PC, or through a mobile device or a phone. So where that biometric capability exists, I believe that is an extra layer of security to prevent an unsecure access to that infrastructure. You don't necessarily need, a security point on every device. Mm-hmm. The security point on the device itself, the light bulb, the toaster, the washing machine or the dryer, that'll be embedded security. So that'll be on a chip. It'll be, it'll have technology that will prevent, for example, unauthorized access. It'll prevent, I'll call it electric access. So those things will be embedded right in the device itself. But as it relates to manipulating or managing that device for the user, they likely will have front-end biometric capability, to secure that network. But, that suffice to say, everything today, including our national electrical grid, mm-hmm. Is connected and is accessible via the digital community. And so we're going to have to be much, much more aware of different levels of security. Again, all the way from the embedded version that I described a little bit, all the way up through the higher level security in authentication and access for authorized users. So it's going to be a layered approach. Intrusion detection is going to play a huge role, and it's playing a huge role today. You mentioned, for example, unexposed data on servers that are unprotected. You're right. IT organizations are still catching up. Mm-hmm. They may never catch up to the hackers, right, at 100% level, but we can make it much more difficult for those hackers to access that data and information by just following, simple protocol. And right. I think that we're one part of, I'll call it the security ecosystem, right? So biometrics, authentication is one part of the entire ecosystem that protects us from all of the bad things that we talked about, but they have to be used in conjunction and in concert with one another.
Right. So we've talked, and actually, just real quick, one of my favorite interviews in the past year was actually of a smart litter box, because I know so many people, go to the regular appliances, the smart light bulbs, the smart toaster, the smart oven. Yes, the smart litter box is a thing. So your cat's litter box could be a security risk, not just a sensory assault. But we talked about all the different devices that people can pick up and where they can get them. Again, we'll have a link to the website and kind of all that thing in the show notes if you want to check it out yourself. Very affordable. I mean, fingerprint scanners are, I'd like to think, a known technology, and producing them should be pretty efficient at this point. So they're relatively cheap. You're not talking about the cost of an entire additional system. But I did want to say, any future products that you may be working on, obviously your partnership with Microsoft, they're always looking for a way to get people to, access their systems more securely. Anything on the horizon you'd like to, talk about?
Well, I think, as I mentioned before, we're going to continue to innovate. We're going to continue to look at the design and the development of the technologies, making it more efficient, making it more accurate. That will go without saying. And we'll also be exploring other biometric modes that make sense, as I described before, to be introduced into the mainstream. But we're going to want to make sure that those technologies will meet all the hurdles of both security and convenience that our fingerprint technology meets today. And that's very important to us.
Hey, very, very well said. And I think we talked about the future of cybersecurity a lot, and I don't want to scare people too much because that list I mentioned way back when, the 5 scariest things in technology for, kind of our Halloween article, one of them was indeed cybersecurity. And not just the fact that, everyday criminals want your bank information and your credit card, but because you said the electrical grid and so much of our infrastructure. Cyber warfare, I think, was what I called that entire section. Just the idea that it's not just criminals and petty thieves, but now you have largely military-funded, government-funded organizations that are out to hack en masse. So biometrics, there's something that we're going to have to incorporate, and we're going to have to do it in a very intelligent way, but I think that as we've kind of outlined here with BioKey, I mean, you can speak to it better than I could. It's, either on an enterprise level or on a consumer individual level, it's not that hard.
It's not that hard, but change is always difficult. And so, keep in mind that the largest companies on the planet who could be more widely exposed will adopt these technologies more rapidly than perhaps some of the medium and small size companies that find it difficult, number one, to afford it, but don't necessarily have the resource and the expertise to be able to get it done. So change is difficult. Timing is always difficult. Allotting the capital to make those changes and to implement those technologies that are required to ensure a more secure venue is always a challenge, but it's very difficult today for, especially again, as I mentioned before, companies that house consumer information or consumer data to ignore this. They really can't. And at the boardroom, in the executive meetings, this is brought up and it's discussed every day because data breaches of incredible magnitude can devalue a company overnight. So from an enterprise perspective, I believe that the next 2 to 3 or 4 years will be amazing years in the context of adoption of cybersecurity technologies, including secure authentication, such as we've been talking about for the past almost hour.
Right.
On the consumer side, consumers are going to be made much more aware of the risks, and they're going to be driven by the large FANG companies who are adopting multi-factor authentication to incorporate that as part of their standard daily fare. So I think consumers are going to be pulled along by the large technology companies who are going to be driving to protect themselves and ultimately make it more difficult for the hackers to access all that consumer data.
Love to hear it. And I think that's a great place to kind of wrap up this interview. Mike, I want to give you one more chance. Anything that we didn't cover, because I feel like we hit a lot of topics. I'm sorry if the conversation, took too many breakneck turns, but you kept up very well and a lot of great information. Anything we didn't talk about that you really want to get in?
Well, Ben, thank you. By the way, this interview was wonderful. I think I got a really good opportunity to describe and let your audience know the basics of biometrics and how, in essence, there's misnomers about its security and its applicability. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate that, and that means a lot to me. I think we've covered a lot. I think what I'll leave the audience with is this. For sure, biometrics became a part of our everyday lives if we adopted an iPhone or a Samsung Galaxy over the last 4 to 5 years, right? When Apple again began by putting the finger scanner in the device and eliminating the potential to use a PIN, enabling that capability. I will leave the audience with this, that for sure, biometrics are going to be a bigger part of our everyday lives as time evolves. And in the context of enterprise users, they're going to be mandated across the board. And what mode, how they're deployed, that'll always be variable. But the bottom line is there's no turning away. Biometrics are going to be part of any secure and convenient security solution. And we hope at BioKey to play a significant role in not only providing, again, greater levels of security, but making it easier for customers to be secure and to ensure that consumers are protected and that our economy is protected, our government agencies are protected, and that at the end of the day, we can all sleep more comfortably because we're trying to stay a half a step or maybe a step ahead of the hackers or those who want to create havoc for us.
I was about to say, you have your work cut out for you with that whole endeavor. Although I will say again, it sounds like you guys are going to be at the Microsoft Ignite event in about a week. So I wish you the best of luck with that. We'll be watching the news there. And then I have another question. Should we expect you out at CES this year?
We will be walking the floor at CES. We will not be exhibiting. It's such a big event.
It is.
And it makes sense for us. It makes sense for us as a company to be working with our partners and the bigger companies who utilize our technology as part of their solutions. So I think you'll see us on the floor at CES, but you won't see us exhibiting this year.
I gotcha. No, and hey, definitely hope to cross paths with you. Computer America is going to be out there, and yeah, we definitely want to shake your hand and hey, catch up on everything that's going on. But again, the Microsoft Ignite event down in Orlando, Florida, and otherwise biokey.com, BIO-KEY.com for more. Link in the show notes. And Mike, one last time, everyone, we have been talking to Mr. Mike DePasquale. He is the chairman and CEO of BioKey International. Mike, thank you so much for coming on Computer America.
Thanks, Ben. It was a pleasure. It was great to be back again.
Our pleasure. And hey, let's not wait a couple of years. Let's definitely do this again sooner. But until next time, have a great one.
Great. Thank you. You too.
All right. Have a good one. Bye-bye. All right, everyone, and there he goes. So obviously, if you want to check that out, computeramerican.com, we'll get that up here shortly. And in the meantime, everyone, let's go ahead and, hey, I think we have time for just one computer and technology news. Just not all that, just not all that much time to really do anything. So let's go ahead and move on over to this one. So this has to do with video games, but it has to do with a very specific subset of video games that I have always found very interesting. Not that I don't have anything against people who play Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike is, as a lot of people would describe, maybe not myself, a very good first-person shooter. A lot of people have described it as the best, the pinnacle of competitive first-person shooters. It's very simple. It's very clean. The reaction, like, it's all reaction-based. It's all strategy-based. There's no gimmicks. It's just point-click. Whoever does it faster, better, and can, really stick to the game plan, you're good to go. But there's always been this booming economy around Counter-Strike over skins. And skins being how a weapon looks, how certain things look within the game. And I think it's also like the knife, the melee weapon. And there are skins that go for thousands of dollars. There are, they're collectible, they're rare, even though they're digital goods. They can be traded on marketplaces, and these third-party marketplaces have been known to make a lot of money. There was a scandal a little while ago about a casino-type deal where they were using skins where you could put in a certain amount of skins that are worth a set amount of money. Like the casino would, kind of track the marketplaces, and they would say that this skin is this rare, therefore it's worth $20, $10, $5, all the way up to thousands of dollars. And then you would put in the skins, get a certain amount of credit for those skins, be able to play a slot machine, be able to play, other kind of poker games or casino-like games, and you'd be able to cash out other rare or lose all your money. Essentially, it was gambling with a few extra steps. So when this article came up, I was very interested because, I don't know, it seemed kind of obvious. Nearly all Counter-Strike microtransactions, check this one out, are being used for money laundering. So this coming to us from Vice and saying that worldwide fraud networks have recently shifted to using Counter-Strike Go keys to liquidate their gains. At this point, nearly all keys purchases that end up being traded or sold on the marketplace are believed to be fraud sourced. And that is not coming from a third-party analyst. That is coming from Valve itself, the one who made the game and hosts the game. So everything I described with the skins is one entire mess, and then this one has to be the keys for the game itself. So everyone, the music in the background means that I told you we just don't have a lot of time to cover this, but I will say the statement says, in the past, most keys traded we observed were between legitimate customers. However, fraud networks have recently shifted to using keys to liquidate their gains. At this point, nearly all keys purchases that end up being traded or sold on the marketplace are believed to be fraud sourced. So there you go. Valve did not immediately respond to requests for comment, but be careful going after those stolen keys or those fraudulent keys, because even if you're caught, even if you're caught in the crossfire, they will revoke your key. They will ban the account it's associated with if you happen to purchase one of these illegal or ill-gotten keys. So be careful out there. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us here on Computer America. I want to once again thank BioKey for coming on. Always a great interview. Love having on guests like that. And if you miss any part of it, check out the podcast wherever podcasts are heard. Definitely recommend that. And hey, until next time, have a great one. Bye, everyone.